So good morning. My name is Lisa Sherman. I'm honored to be the president of the Southeastern Zone. We appreciate you being here. And if you are a member of New York State AFERD, thank you. If you are not a member of New York State AFERD, I'm going to do a little pitch for membership. It's membership that brings wonderful workshops like this via Zoom and obviously in person. We hope to be back in person next year. Southeastern Zone is always working hard. Even through the pandemic, we were working hard to bring quality professional development to people all across Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Dutchess. There's lots of benefits to being a member of New York State AFERD. If you visit newyorkstateaferd.org for more information, besides professional development, there's networking and there's liability insurance. And like I said, lots more. We are always looking for new members for our Southeastern Zone board and at our meetings. We are also looking for a new feature this year. We're calling it a county representative. That county representative from Dutchess, Putnam, Rockland, and Westchester. The county rep will then help us branch out, especially into areas like Rockland County, where we would like to get more membership out of Rockland and more involvement. When you volunteer, and if you were to volunteer for Southeastern Zone work, you're helping us with finding presenters, organizing special events, and encouraging membership. It's nearly not a big time commitment. And right now we've been doing a lot of things on Zoom. All right, I already went over the sign in the chat. If you haven't signed in, if you look at the welcome screen, it explains that, which I already explained it. It's important that you put your full name, membership, and CTLE if you're interested. I think everybody's muted, which is great. If you do have a question, you can put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And our presenter, Megan, will be giving a QR code towards the end for some feedback. And just so you know, this session is being recorded and a link will be sent out. We're not sure when, because central office needs some time to process all the recordings, and you'll have access to the recordings. Plus, what we have decided to do is some people who couldn't be on this today could get access to this professional development. I will also be putting a link to a survey in the chat. If you can answer that survey, that would be helpful to us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan Vlad, who is going to present Creating Virtual Projects for Secondary Health Education. Thank you, Megan, for being here. Let me stop sharing my screen. And I think we're good to go. I'm going to mute. Megan, if you need anything, let me know.
Sure. Thank you. All right. So I haven't used Zoom in a while. Let me try to share my screen. It's already not giving me the option to.
It's not giving you an option to share?
No, not right this second.
Let me change it to multiple participants. Might be my error.
Sure, that's okay.
And I'm not sharing anymore, right? It's just the gallery view of everybody, right?
Correct.
Okay, multiple participants can share simultaneously. Okay.
Lisa, is she a co-host?
Yes, she is.
Okay, whatever you did, it worked. I can share now.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, so right now you should see kind of like a pink background with little cartoon people. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is my first presentation. I'm super nervous and just trying to put myself out there. and the work that I've created. So at the end, like was stated before, I do have a QR code for an evaluation just for my own personal use to make myself a better presenter, so that I can continue doing this and growing as I go forward. So if you stick with me to the end and fill out that evaluation, I will provide you with every single template and more that I've included in this presentation so that you can use it. The only thing that I ask is that you please don't share it with other people, as I'm going to start putting things on Teachers Pay Teachers. And so therefore would like to, be able to do that without other people sharing it first. So we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Megan Vlad. I teach 6th and 7th grade health here at Eastchester Middle School. I'm semi-active on Twitter. I like to post different things that my students are doing, different projects, things that I can connect with them on. So my handle for Twitter is @MeganVlad. So we are going to start with a QR code. So if you want to just take out your phone, you can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. What is your experience with creating virtual spaces like Bitmoji Classroom? This was a huge craze during the pandemic. Everyone was kind of moving to this virtual model. We did see it a lot in health education. So just put how used to it you are. That will really help guide kind of where we go with this presentation. And if I need to spend a little more time going over kind of the nuts and bolts of that, or if we're kind of good with all the other stuff. So I'll give you just a moment. Sometimes there's no service in schools. Okay, thank you for your responses. So I'm just going to go over kind of a roadmap of how I structure my units when I am creating these virtual projects. So the first thing I always do is pre-teach. So I start it with, tell me everything you know. And I usually do this with kind of like a warm-up or a do now question. So I ask students, it doesn't matter if it's right, if it's wrong, if you heard it on the bus, if you learned it on TV, tell me everything that you know about this topic. And that kind of gives me a starting point to figure out, okay, what misconceptions do we have? What do we really need to learn? And kind of how can I gear this to best fit my students' needs? Then we go into guided notes about the topic. We have discussions and we do different lead up activities. Then we go into what I call the research dump, where they're compiling resources related to that topic. Then I release my resources to students. And this comes into play when it comes to students that have IEPs and 504s. We go into a project called the deep dive, where they're taking a closer look at different components of the resources they've found. And then we get to the fun part where they are actually creating the virtual space. And then lastly, we do sharing out, we do self and peer assessment, and then we reflect. Before I do any of this though, and before I get into my units for the year, I have my students complete a community health resource assignment, and they have to find different health resources within 15 miles of their home address, and then give their community a grade. So if they can find every resource within 15 miles with, all of those things at their fingertips, and we're fortunate in Westchester, most communities do have them within 15 miles, then their community would get an A. And this is really great because they can then transfer these skills and this knowledge into all of the research projects I have them do moving forward. And this works as a really strong assessment tool for the students. So the way that I structure these lessons and these projects, I love to co-teach, and I'm going to get into the specifics of that. I do project chunking, which gives the illusion of rolling deadlines, and then I provide them with these learning templates. So how does co-teaching benefit me and my students? So with co-teaching, I work with our library media specialist, and this allows our specialist to come in, talk to the students about research, whether that's more in-depth using the school database, or just doing a simple Google search and understanding the connection between what is a valid source and what is not. That kind of breaks down that side of it. It also provides an alternate learning location. So my students can physically go to another location if my classroom isn't what's best for them during that moment or that class. And it also provides an additional adult facilitator. So because I work closely with our library media specialist, she is aware of every aspect of my projects and then can help my students with any questions they might have or things that are tech related, because she understands the flow and really the components of the project. So it might not be a health related question they ask her, but she can pretty much guide them through whatever they need. So project chunking is the next thing that I do. And this really helps me to meet all of my students with such a large multi-step research project. So I give them the illusion of rolling deadlines. And what I mean by this is I give them far more time than they need, because I build in the time and a half to double time for my students that have IEPs and 504s that require this extra time built in. So my students who are general education, no accommodations or modifications needed, can meet those deadlines much faster than my other students. And I then provide them with screencasts of the instructions for each step of the project so that they can move ahead, even if their classmates are still behind. And by providing these instructions virtually for them so that it's right in Google Classroom, it frees up me to move around and work one-on-one or in small groups with students who might need that extra support. And so this is a way to meet all of those modifications. I also do this with the resources that I provide them. Students that are not receiving any accommodations or modifications can choose 3 resources from my list of resources to use in their project, while other students on a case-by-case basis might have the opportunity to choose 5, 6, 7, up to 10, depending on what their IEP and 504 states that they need. So on to the templates. The first is the guided notes. So I start, and the specific project I'm going to be showing you is what we do for our stress unit. So I will go through a presentation with them about stress, and we will do different lead up activities. So I play a game called Come On 6, which is done with dice and really stresses them out in a positive way. Then we look at the takeaways from that. We combine that with our notes. So they fill out this template, basically fill in the blanks. I also have spots for them to reflect and respond and ask questions within the template. And it's really just a living document and living set of notes for them. Another unit related activity that I do specific to stress is after we watch a video about stressors and how stress is kind of like water going into a bucket. When that water comes into the bucket, we have to have ways to let the water out of the bucket. So I break this down with literal pictures of buckets, and they have to add their stressors to the bucket and explain why is this a stressor for you. Then they go on to talk about how do they empty their bucket? What do they do to relieve that stress? The third slide that you're seeing here on this left side is what might another middle schooler be dealing with? It could be similar or different to what you deal with and what your stressors are. So they go through this and they kind of take the time to break it down. Sometimes more personal things come out here that friends are dealing with, and then they find ways to give advice to that student and help them out. Then we move into the research dump. What I ask students to do is compile 15 different resources specific to stress, anything that has to do with stress. In this, I also provide them with search terms to help them, as well as questions that can help to guide their research. So all they have to do is copy and paste into Google and then sort through those websites and decide what is worth them using and looking into and what is not. So on the left side, they link whatever site they're using. And then on the right side, they give a 1 to 2 sentence description. What might someone find if they go to that site? This is the most hated part of every single project. It's called the deep dive. The reason they hate it so much is because they actually have to do some work here. After they've done their preliminary searching, finding their 15 sources, then they actually have to go back in, take a much closer look and a deep dive into each of those resources, and then summarize that information. So everything you're seeing right now are student work samples. So this student was able to compile their resources, break them down, describe them, summarize them, and explain how they would be useful to a stress-related project. Then comes the fun part, which is actually creating their virtual calm room. This, again, is student work, and the following things are student work as well. So I give students roughly 2 days in class to build these, and we work on learning the different components and then actually how to link them and make them useful. So each item that you see in here is linked, and the students would include those links from their deep dive. The final piece is the project key. What they need to do here is let me know when they are on that object. Oops, sorry, wrong way. When I click on the plants, where is that going to lead me? When I click on this mirror, where does that take me? So they will include all of the items from their deep dive, which is here, and tell me exactly what object I would click on to get to that resource. This is how I usually structure and break down my units, and they typically take about 1 month. And then I also include a flex week, which I'll explain at the end. So the first week, students come in, I pre-teach, we go over the guided notes, we go over any activities. So for this example, Come On 6 would be played, we'd have a discussion around it. Then the next class, we would talk about the stress bucket activity and work through that. Then they would get 2 days to compile their research dump using the school database, using Google searches, and applying those skills that we had previously. There is also a community resource within their research dump and in their deep dive, which they can pull directly from that community research project we did at the beginning of our semester. So they already have this built in, and they just continue to add on and add on. Then we go into the deep dive. I give them a full week to work on that so that they have opportunities to go in, and I'm constantly giving them revision and feedback along the way. Week 4 is project work where they are actually building their virtual spaces. And then week 5 goes into the pair share, self and peer assessments. And then I give them the opportunity to write a reflection and an opportunity to revise their work based on their peer feedback and my feedback to them directly throughout the project. Then there's the final week, which is a flex week. Sometimes things don't go as planned and we need a little bit longer on certain components. So I always like to build in at least 1 week of time where students have the opportunity to continue their work, and we can move as a class to just slow things down to a better pace. If we don't need this week, then we just go right into the next unit. So my questions to you: what modifications would you make to this? And then when you've answered that, again with the QR code, what other projects or units could this model be used for? And we're going to use this for some more discussions.
Megan, you have a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm not sure, the flow here, if you want to answer them now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or in a moment or at the end. But I'll read them to you.
Sure.
One was, Megan, may I ask you why you use 15 research sources?
Sure. So I teach 7th grade, and I want them to find 15 because most of the time when they start this, the sites they're finding are not quality. And so then we can kind of go through and pick and choose. That number could be higher or lower. That's just the number I give them. They usually have a meltdown at first. And then once they start doing it and realizing it's not that much work, they come around to it and really adapt easily, and then are thankful that that work's pretty much done for them when they move to the next section.
Thank you. And another question is, what program did you use for the virtual comm room?
Sure. So that is with Google, and I'm going to show that in just a little bit because there were a handful of people that were not as familiar with the virtual classroom side of it. So that is all done through Google Slides. And I break down each piece of that for them, and I will do that in just a little bit with this group.
Okay. And there was an earlier question. I think it was, how long are your units?
Sure. So that goes back to, and I'm just gonna come off of
I'm not sure
these.
if it was how long or how many, something like that.
So for the length, they're typically about 1 month, just because this is how I break it down. It's usually a week of more direct teacher instruction. And then it goes into discussion, students working independently or together. It just depends on the unit. The one I'm sharing right now, like I said, is stress. It's individual based. But I will talk about as soon as I kind of get everybody's answers from the QR codes here. I'll talk about the other ways that I apply this to other units that I'm covering. But I do 4 units with my 7th graders. I see them every other day for a semester.
Thank you, Megan. And I just want to say this to everybody here. I know people are putting their name in the chat. That's for attendance purposes. If you are a member, please put member. And if you need CTLE hours, you need to write the letters CTLE next to your name. Just so we have that later. And there's another question. Do you include other aspects of mental health?
So this is specifically my stress unit. The next unit that my students are actually going into, which we will start tomorrow, is our mental health unit. And so I do an entirely separate project with the same base components of this. It's just that final piece of the project that changes and is different.
Okay. All right, we'll let you get back to it. If there are more questions, I'll let you know in a little bit,
Sure.
but those
Yeah.
were the questions for now.
Absolutely. So I'm just looking through on modifications. I don't know if you can see them on your screens or not, but I just want to read through them quickly. And this is also helpful for me to kind of really change the way I look at things. So shorten it because they have over 300 kids, the amount of time it takes to complete it, modify by less sources, examples of for visual learners, and assistance with the resource list. Yeah, so maybe I didn't do a great job of explaining that. So when I give them my list of resources, they come up with their own, and then I release usually about 10 resources that I provide for them that I know are credible, valid, reliable sources. And so when I have students that are needing that little extra bit, I release those to them and they can then go through and look at them. Sometimes it's as simple as kids' health. Other times I pull scholarly articles that are at a middle school reading level so that they can work through those. And then the pacing. So this is something where I have just kind of been tweaking it to figure out what works best for my students, but absolutely pace it in whatever way would be beneficial for you and your students. And then I'm just going to open up what other projects this could work for. Literally everything. I'm not going to read through them all, but yeah, literally everything there. So the way that I use this in other units, so I use the same model of a research dump. Then we go into a deep dive, taking a closer look at different items. And so, for example, with mental health, after we've taken a closer look at all of these different things, we also do a template called Spotlight On, which is something that is separate. I haven't included it in this presentation, but I'm happy to share, where students become an expert on different areas of mental health and specific mental health disorders. So when we get into our mental health unit, after we've done the pre-teaching, our discussions, our activities, we then go into the research component of it. So I allow students, I give them 6 options of 6 different mental health disorders, and then they get to pick their top 3 choices. Once they have ranked their top 3 choices, I will then break them into groups. They don't know that they're in groups yet. They start with independent research, and I try to match them with their top choice. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So if I have 18 students that want to do anxiety, not all 18 are going to get to do that. So then they go to their second or their third choice, depending on the numbers. So they get broken down. They do a day of independent research where they're finding information on their own, using their research dump template. Then they get placed into their group. So other students who selected, we'll just stick with anxiety, anxiety as their number 1 choice and got anxiety to research. Those individuals become a group. They combine the information they've found, they dig through it together, they summarize what they're learning about, and then we actually move into a podcast. So another way to have a virtual project, and then they are able to record those using a site called Anchor, which is free to students and educators. and I believe actually everybody. There's some paid features on it, but we don't go into those. So they record their podcast and then they share with their peers so that everyone is learning about these different mental health disorders. And we then have a final kind of piece that we go through together with discussions. I have guest speakers come in from NAMI, and that's one other way that I apply this project. So I hope that also answers that mental health question from before. Are there any other questions that popped up in the chat?
Sorry, did you want to answer another question now?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm
Okay.
going to get the other stuff.
So we have a question. Do your 4 units have assessments in addition to the research project?
Yeah, so every activity that we do that's a lead up activity is counted towards their assessment. I do not give tests or quizzes in my opinion, I don't think they do that much because our students do have access to smartphones. And, if we have a question about our own health, chances are we're turning to Google. So for me personally, I don't give, like tests and quizzes to them. I do everything through projects and discussion and their participation in those different aspects of things. So that's kind of the way that I work it. But you could absolutely include tests and quizzes within this. They peer assess each other throughout with different things, just making sure, did someone understand this concept? Were they able to explain it to you? So both formal and summative assessments there. Were there any other questions?
Would you be able to put the link to the podcast in the chat?
So they haven't recorded yet. And I did ask for all of my students' permission before sharing. So I don't want to include the ones from last year. But I'm happy to share those at a later date if people are interested. They're usually 2 to 3 minutes in length. Some students really go beyond and they ask if they're saying, I think we're going to be at 5 minutes. Is that okay? I always tell them yes, as long as it's relevant information that you're sharing. But they're able to work through those together and they create their own script, and that all has to be approved first so that I know the information is accurate
Right.
that they're going to be sharing.
So to clarify, the person was wondering about the free site, not the actual student work. Was there a link to the podcast?
Sure. The website's called Anchor, ANCHOR. So if you type in Anchor podcast.
I'll type it in the chat as well, but it's just called
Sure.
Anchor.
Anchor, yep. So if you type in Anchor podcast, it should show up.
Anchor podcast. All right, I put that in the chat. Does that look correct? If you can't see the chat, that's fine. I just wrote Anchor podcast.
Yes, that looks correct.
Okay, and just again, sorry, housekeeping, people need to put in the chat, but to everyone, not direct message to me, their name. We'll give Megan a chance to take a drink of water. Their name, whether they're a member, and the CTLE. I'm not sure when the central office does review this later, if they'll be able to see the direct messages to me. So just to be on the safe side, please make sure that you put your attendance in the chat, but where it says to everyone. I see a few people did it just to me. So if you could redo that, that would be great. All right, thank you, Megan. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure. I just want to make sure that you can still see it. Should be on like my Google Drive right now.
We see, it says like Anthony's comm room, Miss
Yep,
Vlad's
okay.
comm room.
Yeah. So you're seeing some other student work, some obviously not as aesthetically pleasing as others, but that's okay. But I wanted to take some time to just walk through how to actually create the virtual comm room itself. So I'm just in Google Slides. I'm going to start a blank template. And from here, I'm going to erase these text box options. And then I can come in to background. And I'm going to choose image. And this is exactly what my students do when they're creating this. And then we're going to do a Google image search. Once you're in this, you really kind of have the freedom to choose. So we always start with just empty room. And some of them look a little scary. And this is when I tell kids they can be creative with it. So if your calm space, and the way I introduce it is, if your parents came to you and said, you can create a room in our house for just you to chill out in, you can relax in here, decorate it however you want, like what would you create? And so we start with just the background. So whether that is outside, maybe that's a basketball court or a soccer field, maybe it's a studio of some sort. So we always just start with empty room. Then students like to do with a view. So from here they can choose. So maybe they want this room, and they're going to click insert, and then they click done. So now you have this background. What's great about making it as the background is that when I come on and drag on here, nothing's going to move. So I didn't copy and paste the picture. By making it the background, nothing is going to change. From here, they have two options. They can go to insert, image, and search the web. So let's say I want to find a chair, and this is stuff that we go over in class together, and that's also recorded, that students get the screencast of, and I'm walking them through each section of this, and I'm happy to share that as well with you. If they were to take this chair here, you can see that the background is still here. We don't want that background to be there. So they would want to use the word transparent so that when they choose a chair, the background is already pulled out for them. Something I also show at this point is how they can rotate it so that it faces a different direction. So you pull up the menu on the side. So it's like a right click of your mouse, or if you've got a laptop, like a wide 2 fingers on your keypad, and then you can rotate and flip it horizontally. So now my chair faces the other direction, and I can adjust the sizing and place it wherever I need it to. So then I can add another thing in here. Let's say I want a desk, and let's see. Let's say I want this table. Can again adjust it down to be the right size and place it here. From here to link, they just need to click on the object, and then again, 2 options. They can either click this chain link up here, or on a keyboard, Command or Control with the letter K will also bring up this same option. So I just click on the object, Control K, and then they paste their link and click apply. So that will then allow them to connect to those other things. Something else I will give them that I also am sharing with you, as long as you fill out the template at the end, is another item. Actually, I can go to my classroom for this. Which allows them to just copy and paste and that is the optional objects. So when they get these optional objects, I have already removed the background. I found all of these different items, so they can just come in and copy and paste. So they're not searching for things. I tell them if they don't like what I have, they are welcome to just do that search like I did before. But they can just come right in. Let's say they like this couch, they can copy it. And then they can paste. Sorry, I'm just unable to get in here. And then adjust however they need for their project. All right. So are there questions on anything that I just went over specific to creating the virtual space? No questions? No? Okay. All right. So when I initially learned about this presentation, I was told that it was 40 minutes, not 50. So lucky for you, we are going to wrap up here. I just want to give credit to my students first and foremost for allowing me to to share their work with all of you. Mentimeter is what I used for the QR codes that generates polls and can show me exactly what people are saying. And then I use Slides Carnival for the slides presentation. If you have not checked out Slides Carnival, they have so many great templates to use that you can just kind of pick and choose what you do and don't want. And the last thing here is the QR code. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email as well as find me on Twitter.
I have two
Sure.
questions. Do you have an instruction template?
So I have all the instructions within all of the templates, and then I give verbal instructions where I'm making a screencast and physically walking students through everything I need them to do. So they're hearing it auditorily, they hear it or they see it visually, and then I will go over it in class with them. And then if they need a one-on-one or small group instruction.
Okay, and then the next question is, where did you find the room choices? Oh, I don't know. Is that the room choices for you or for? I'm assuming that's,
I think that's probably for the virtual background. So you click on background
okay,
and then select image, Google image search. And I'm going to send the instructions. So like all of the things I covered today, I'm sending, as long as you fill out that evaluation with the QR code that's on your screen right now, you will get all of that. I just need to get all the emails put together from whoever turns the evaluation in, and then I will send that today.
okay, great. And then I also put, for everybody that's still here, there's a link to the forms. Okay, okay, it says I cannot open the QR code because of school constraints. Can this information be emailed to me? Megan, if it can, and I'll let you answer that, I put your email in the chat twice.
Sure.
So whoever, Karen, Megan, are you okay with that?
Sure. So I'm sorry, was it an issue with the Google form?
The QR code. I guess Karen said she cannot open the QR code because of school constraints, but can the information be emailed to her?
Sure, sure. One other
But
thing
I'll have her email you.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that might work is if you're connected to school Wi-Fi, you might be able to access it.
Okay, the next question is, will we have access to this unit that you use, or will you be sharing it?
If you fill out the evaluation.
If you fill out the evaluation,
Yes.
okay?
Because I'm trying to get
and as I said earlier, I put just a little bit ago, the form for our survey. Are there any other questions for Megan? If you want to stop sharing your screen, Megan, I don't know, we could see people who are still here.
Sure.
If anybody wants to ask questions directly and unmute, not just in the chat, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely.
No? I can't see any. If you want to ask a question, just unmute and you can go ahead. Okay. Let me just check the chat one more time. We are a few minutes early, which is good. And Megan, you did a great job for your first time.
Thank you.
If everybody, we can give some feedback to Megan, who told me before she was extremely nervous, but I think that she did a wonderful job, especially on Zoom, which is not easy. Thank you. All right, so I was just looking to see if there's says great job, thank you.
And you can be brutally honest in that evaluation. I'm all for the constructive feedback and critique.
Okay, is Kelly Streifler still on here?
I am. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, okay, so randomly I picked your name for our $25 raffle. You will be receiving a gift card in the mail from Southeastern Zone. It was a member only raffle, so I went through our names and picked them out. And you are our first winner of today for this session. So Kelly, congratulations. Another benefit of being a member of New York State AFERD.
Keep that membership rolling, automatic renewal, everybody. Thank
Yep.
you.
And again, membership helps pay for this stuff and all future professional development, and we really appreciate it. All right, folks. So again, the form for our survey is in the chat. If you can get that before I turn this off, if you can get Megan's email before I turn this off, because I will be ending in a moment so I can do the next session. And again, if you need to put your name in the chat with your membership status, and if you need CTLEs, please do that in the chat. This is the last call. Again, thank you so much, Megan. You did a great job. Appreciate you putting yourself out there for New York State AFERD and Southeast Zone. Everybody who's here, I'm hoping we'll see you again at the next session. It could be me as the moderator. It could be obviously another person if you're going to go in a different room. Hopefully you have all the links that you need. I do believe we have our next health session following this. I think it's your colleague, right, Megan? Is it Kristen?
I used to work with Kristen.
Okay, all right. So we have presenting, so unit hooks in skills-based health education. So if you're interested in health, I'm gonna end and then we'll restart. And if not, there's obviously 3 other sessions going on simultaneously. Does anybody have any last minute questions or needs? All right, thank you. See you again in a few minutes. Bye.